100% disabled is not the top of the compensation scale. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and I feel like I have unlocked secret VA lore. I have finally run across the Veterans Administration's special monthly compensation rules, and I gotta say, I feel like these are some carefully guarded secrets. Or maybe it's just that the people receiving these benefits don't realize that they're getting something beyond the run-of-the-mill compensation, and I'll talk about that more in a bit. To get started, the VA's Special Monthly Compensation, SMC, is a higher rate of compensation than they pay to veterans with certain needs or disabilities. Now, before we go too far, I want to address that phrase about a higher rate of compensation. The VA is dancing around a fine point about how the law for disability compensation is constructed. The law allows for additional payments on top of like your normal 100% disability, but they also set caps. And as you'll see in a second, in some cases, the VA communicates about those additional payments, and then in other cases, the VA communicates about the caps. Now, you've probably already dealt with the VA and gotten the feeling that it is just a mindless bureaucratic maze. But to be fair, when it comes to special monthly compensation, it seems like the VA is making a good faith effort to consolidate like a considerable amount of bureaucratic legalese into the most concise package that they can. But, as we've seen with some federal agencies, sometimes that concise packaging assumes that the beneficiaries, you, already understand the fundamentals. So today, I'm going to lay the groundwork for some of those fundamentals and provide some context about the special monthly compensation rates. Let's get started by taking a look at the piece of U.S. code that governs service-connected disabilities. That's Title 38, Section 1114. And there's actually a lot of really neat stuff here. Probably the first thing that we have to get out of the way is just the implication of the name of this law. It's called Rates of Wartime Disability Compensation. And Congress does set out rates for so-called peacetime disability compensation, but those rates are exactly the same as the wartime rates. So, don't let somebody bamboozle you into thinking that you don't qualify because of the timing of your service. Next, I'm going to show you the text of this law, but I don't want you to think about the words yet. Just look at the structure. In fact, I'm blocking out all the text so that you can see that there are basically two portions to this law. Paragraphs A through J are short and simple, while paragraphs K through T are long and wordy. The reason for this is that paragraphs A through J define the compensation level for each disability rating from 10 to 100%. You see? And notice that J is the 10th letter of the alphabet. Just as an interesting nugget, notice the wording of paragraph J. While the disability is rated as total. Now, you'll sometimes hear people fret over the distinction between a 100% disability and a total disability, but Congress doesn't even use the idea of 100% when they're discussing compensation levels. Oh, and you'll notice that I blacked out those compensation levels. I did that because Congress does not update this section every year. They set these compensation levels back in 2009, and since then they've just kind of left it to the VA to apply an inflation adjustment every year. That is one of the reasons that the VA website is so useful once you understand what they're really talking about. But back to the structure. You see those wordy paragraphs from K through T? Well, those define the special monthly compensation. And the key point here is that when we go back to the VA website, you'll notice that they talk about SMC rate variations. SMCK or Q, SMCL through SMCN. All they're doing is providing rates for the different paragraphs of Section 1114. Now, I I'm not going to go through all of the rates. I mean, the VA website does a fine job of that. Instead, I want to point out that SMCK, what some legal firms call Special K, is one of those forms of special monthly compensation that add to your normal VA disability payments. And the same thing goes for SMCR, which is usually called aid and attendance, or SMCS, which is often called housebound. And the remainder of those special monthly compensation rates are those caps that I talked about earlier. As far as eligibility, the main consideration is so-called anatomical loss. Reproductive organs, hands, feet, arms, legs, vision, hearing, and the different levels of special monthly compensation reflect the varying degrees of severity of those anatomical losses. As an example, let's just consider the lower extremities, feet and legs. A veteran qualifies for SMCK if they lose 1 foot. If he loses both feet, he qualifies for SMCL. If he loses both legs in such a way that he doesn't have natural knee motion when prosthetics are worn, well, then that's special monthly compensation level M. SMCN involves the loss of both legs in such a way that prosthetics can't even be worn. Now, obviously, there is an immense amount of nuance with these rules. The VA website goes into greater detail about how they categorize the specific conditions that an individual service member may have. And so if you believe that you're eligible for special monthly compensation, you should work closely with a VSO to make sure that you get properly categorized. But one clue as to whether or not a condition might qualify for special monthly compensation can be found in the VA schedule for rating disabilities. This is a list of all the diagnostic codes that the VA uses along with the standards that lead to specific disability rating levels. If we take a look at the diagnostic codes for, say, loss of a penis, you'll notice that little footnote beside the rating of 30%. That directs the VA to review this particular type of anatomical loss for entitlement to special monthly compensation. Now, there's a couple things to notice here. Number one, you do not need a rating of 100% permanent and total to qualify for special monthly compensation. And some conditions that do grant a 100% disability rating and that do seem to have something to do with anatomical loss, like a kidney transplant, well, they do not have that little footnote about special monthly compensation. But so what? Well, I said at the beginning of this video that I feel like I have unlocked some kind of secret information about the VA. And I say that because I have talked to a lot of people about how the disability system works. And quite honestly, only one person even mentioned special monthly compensation, and that was in passing. In fact, it was a female officer who'd had a hysterectomy and was just surprised that you could get compensation above the 100% level. But I've also talked to a number of people who were obviously getting special monthly compensation. I mean, mostly amputees. Many of them at least acted like they were getting the same level of compensation as someone who was merely 100% permanent in total. In fact, one gentleman was downright vehement, arguing that the system didn't adequately compensate him for his loss of a leg. So, this might mean a couple of things. Either there are people out there who are entitled to special monthly compensation, but they're not getting it because they don't know it exists. Or there are people who are getting this kind of extra compensation and they don't realize that they're receiving something above the normal 100% level. And then there might be people who kind of shy away from a 100% disability rating because they have a vague sense that that would be stealing compensation from people who are more entitled to it without realizing that 100%, it's not even the top of the compensation scale. Any way the ball bounces, it seems like a misunderstanding of the special monthly compensation rules can lead to friction among veterans. And I've said this before, that the VA definition of a disability is so vastly different than the definition used by any other federal agency that the general public has a tendency to assume that a disabled vet is far more disadvantaged than they may be in reality. If you want to see what I mean by that, watch this video.